The longest manual I've written over the years is on the subject of diesel automatic transmissions. I think it's about 130 pages long. I mean, literally, that's how much information I had to cover to talk about everything related to getting one of these diesel automatic transmissions to shift at peak performance. You have to start with the basics. You have to start making sure your whole vacuum system is healthy. Then you have to make sure you don't have any leaks anywhere, because if you have vacuum leaks going off in some other component in the car, then your transmission is not getting the proper vacuum. And particularly on these 240Ds, it has two things going against it. Number one, it's only a 2.4 liter diesel, so you need everything at peak performance, not only the transmission but the engine, for this thing to get up and move with modern day traffic. The other thing is, on these 240Ds, in the 1980 to 83 era, they did not have a pressure control rod which controlled the shift points. Everything on this transmission is controlled by vacuum, both how smooth it shifts and when it shifts. So if you have vacuum issues, the transmission can literally go crazy on you, and that's probably why a lot of people have had their transmissions replaced when they never needed replacing. I'm going to open up the hood here and kind of show you some of the first things you should check. And then we're going to take this out on the road before I do anything, because I want to kind of show you what's happening with this. And then I've got some ideas on some quick tests and some adjustments I can make, and then we'll take it back out on the road and see if we get any improvement at all. By the end of production of the W123 240D, Mercedes was putting an awful lot of vacuum lines and vacuum hoses on these engines, partly to reduce emissions, and all this can affect how the transmission shifts. Look at all these lines going up here to this block, and then into these two white valves here, and then it's going over to the EGR. So if any of these lines are plugged in improperly, or you've got leaks in any of the fittings here, or maybe these valves are bad and it's all bleeding vacuum off, then the right vacuum isn't getting to the line going to the transmission. Now you look closely here, this is the black line that's going all the way down back to the transmission. So you got to make sure that the vacuum line of the transmission is plugged in properly. You need to make sure the vacuum modulator is not leaking. Then you need to make sure that there's no disconnects on any of these hoses and fittings here. But finally, you have to make sure this is routed properly. With the advent of more vacuum hoses and lines on these engines, Mercedes started putting these stickers on the front core support. This is a vacuum diagram which shows where all these hoses are supposed to go, along with some codes for color. So one of the first things you want to do is check this diagram. If you don't have this diagram, you may have to find one. Sometimes these get torn off or they get worn off. In this case, this diagram is in a very good condition, but I am going to need a magnifying glass because I'm getting old. So I got to get down in here and see, okay, what about this line that goes up to here and that goes to that block? This goes over to the EGR, that goes over there. So you want to spend some time when you're troubleshooting any kind of transmission shifting problem. Make sure that you're getting good vacuum here from the vacuum pump. Now, I have a manual called Mercedessource Troubleshooting and Repair, and that's going to help you troubleshoot your vacuum pump, whether or not you got any major leaks in the system. That's the first thing you need to do. Then you want to check routing, and I've done that, and the routing on this particular engine looks okay. So before I do anything else, let's take this thing out on the road. I'm going to show you what it does. If you haven't ridden in a 240D, this will give a new meaning to slow. But this is a badly tuned 240D. Now what I'm doing here is I'm waiting at this main road. I've got to make sure there's no cars at least a quarter mile away, or I'm going to have some really mad drivers at me pulling out in front of them in this car that just will not accelerate. So we'll just sit here and wait. Here comes some more cars. Now if I turn to the right, it's going to be going uphill. I don't want to go uphill. Okay, now I'm going to floor it right now. It's floored. Okay, it just shifted in the second, shifted in the third. Look at that. It's floored. Oh, it shifted into fourth at 40 miles an hour. I still have it floored. It's approaching 45, 50 miles an hour. How's that? 0 to 50 in 36 seconds. Just kidding. But look at that, it's still floored. Oh man. That brake's good. Okay, after I turn here, we're going to turn the camera off, and then we'll get on a flat here and we'll go through it again, shifting the transmission manually. All right, let's try it again. I pulled the shift lever down into low, and I'm going to go through it manually. Let's see if we get any improvement in acceleration. Okay, right now I'm going to floor it. Now I'm going to shift S. Oh, it immediately shifted into third. Oh, there we go. Look at that. I'm at 35 miles an hour, 38 miles an hour, 40. It's still floored. Now we'll shift into drive. It immediately drops into drive. So even shifting it manually is, oh man. Now I understand why my friend's wife had such a sore foot. She was literally pressing against the floor, hoping, just hoping, the car would go faster. This heavy traffic road here, I've got it floored. Oh man, 25. Oh, it just shifted into third at 28. It's still floored. Oh, it shifted into fourth gear at 36 miles an hour. It's still floored, and we're approaching 45. We're getting up to 50. Can you believe it? We're almost at 50 miles an hour. Now I've got to turn into the shop. Let's take this back there. I'm going to do a few adjustments, see if we can get this to perform any better with just messing with the vacuum. Okay, now I'm going to go to work. I've got my vacuum hand pump tester, which is something you'll need to thoroughly test the system. Then I have my VCV vacuum test unit here. This is the vacuum control valve right here that controls the amount of vacuum going back to the transmission. So this could be a problem. We could have some leaks. We could have a problem at the modulator. We're going to have to take both this and go through a bunch of testing sequences, which I cover in my manual in detail. We also have these particular tools available. So if you're going to get into adjusting and tuning your own transmission, I highly recommend you have this VCV test gauge and the vacuum hand pump gauge. Okay, we're ready to head back out on the road. It only took me about 15 minutes to find a problem with the amount of vacuum going to the transmission modulator. So I made some modifications to the hose routing, checked the operation of the VCV with my VCV gauge, and we've got good vacuum now going to the modulator. The proper amount of vacuum, not just vacuum. So let's try it now. Okay, I'm going to floor it. Oh, there she goes. Revs up. Okay, there we're in second. Okay, she shifted to third at 35 miles an hour. Right on up to 50, 52, and it's shifted into fourth. Look at that. Now granted, this isn't a turbo diesel, but that's pretty good for a 240D. What a difference. Okay, I'm cruising along here at about 30 miles an hour in fourth gear. Let's see how the kickdown works. I'm going to go ahead and floor it right now. 32 miles an hour, floor it. Okay, she shifted into third. Okay, we got 40, 45, 50, 53, shifted into fourth. What a difference. Okay, now I'm cruising along here about 5 miles an hour, and I'm just going to slowly accelerate as if I were in town traffic and see how it does. Okay, it's not floored, it's about 3/4 of the way down. That's pretty good acceleration. Shifted into third. You notice it jumped right into fourth. That's one of the problems with these vacuum operated transmissions. If you play with the throttle and it's not fully to the floor, you sometimes get that rapid jump between third and fourth. Now this time, I'm going to start out fairly slow and then just gradually floor it, but keep it to the floor, okay? All right. There, she shifted into third. Now it didn't jump to fourth that time because I've got the throttle to the floor. Now I can ease off on the throttle and notice it shifted into fourth gear at 45. So when you're driving one of these 240Ds with all vacuum controls on the transmission, no pressure control rod or no Bowden cable, you can manipulate the shift points by where you position the throttle. Watch again. This time I'll go ahead and go out on the road and manipulate the shift points. Okay, we're into third. Keep it floored. Now I'll back it off and I'll immediately floor it again and it'll downshift. So you can see how you can play with the shift points with your throttle. Then of course I release the throttle there and immediately shifted into fourth gear at 48 miles an hour. So now we're just cruising. Nice cruising in a 240D. Well, how's that for an easy repair? Instead of costing $2,000 or $3,000 for a new transmission, it only took 15 minutes of doing some vacuum modifications, testing, and adjusting. Now, I'm not saying that every transmission problem that you might run into with these old diesels is going to be able to be fixed with some vacuum adjustment. I get these emails all the time. They'll say, oh, the transmission's slipping real bad, you know, at speed. Sometimes the transmission wears out and no amount of vacuum adjusting, you know, if it won't go into gear, it's probably not a vacuum issue. If your transmission smells real burnt when you pull the dipstick out and give it a good whiff, you know, it's time to start looking for a replacement transmission. But if it slips, now there's a difference. You know, my book talks about flaring. And a flare is when it goes and then just slips momentarily and then shifts. Sometimes that's a vacuum issue. But if your transmission goes and slips for 3 or 4 seconds, probably no amount of vacuum adjusting is going to help that problem. So I just want to warn you, if you set out to troubleshoot and repair one of these yourself, you're not going to lose anything. At least you're going to get a second opinion. You're going to be the person that's going to give this transmission a second opinion. Once again, the manual I wrote a number of years ago is the most complete and the most detailed manual I've written. So I'm not going to be doing any detailed videos on tuning these diesel automatics because I've already written this lengthy manual. If you flip through it, it's loaded full of pictures, all kinds of descriptions. It takes you chapter by chapter through the steps you need to take, beginning with the simple things and moving up to the more complex things like adjusting the VCV valve to really fine-tune when the transmission shifts and how smoothly it shifts. Now in this case, I don't think I need to make any further adjustments to it. It's good to go. All I can say is if you have one of these older diesels and you're having any kind of transmission issues, check out my manual. It could save you thousands of dollars.